Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. And apologize earlier for the late start and the technical difficulties, but I'm glad to see all of you here today. So like Mark was saying, I'm Rachel. I'm a student at ICD. I'm in the one-year master's program studying international relations and cultural diplomacy. And so the way this afternoon is going to work, I'm going to speak briefly about No Lost Generation, and then after I speak, we're going to have a series of presentations from our panelists. And then we're going to have a short break, and then I'm going to have a dialogue with those same panelists talking about the role of civil society, especially as it relates to today's migration challenges. And we're also going to talk about social inclusivity and youth engagement as well. So really briefly, No Lost Generation. It's basically, thank you, Esteban. So No Lost Generation is basically an initiative that started at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And it started as a student club, and a group of students, they wanted to connect with the refugee community in Washington, D.C. And then later that year, it was adopted by the U.S. State Department. And what the State Department did, they helped spread the initiative to different chapters across the United States. And so as of last year, and this started in 2013, so as of last year, there's 30 student chapters of No Lost Generation across the United States. And starting this last fall, one chapter actually opened up at NYU in Abu Dhabi, and then it was my responsibility to attempt to open a chapter here in Berlin. And so this made it the first European chapter of No Lost Generation. And the title itself, No Lost Generation, it's alluding to the fact that a lot of the refugees are young people, and due to the conflict, they're missing out on educational opportunities, and there's this fear that there's going to be a lost generation of youth. And so the aim of No Lost Generation was to not only connect college students with their counterparts, but also to offer a wide range of educational opportunities to ensure that the younger population of refugees aren't missing, or I mean, they will be missing some vital resources in regards to the education, but trying to sort of close the gap and making sure that they can engage and participate in education regardless of where they are. And so I'm going to talk about the work done by the other chapters in the US very briefly, and then I'm going to talk about what happened last semester and how we tried to get it started here. And I see a few students who are part of this chapter here last semester, and so I'll just reflect on that, and I'll talk about some of the challenges, some of the lessons I learned, and then sort of the takeaways. And so like I was saying, No Lost Generation is affiliated with the US State Department, but that doesn't mean that the State Department in any way is leading any of the group initiatives or the fundraising or the advocacy. It's all student-led. And that's really important in terms of youth engagement. And so all of the work being done, all of the fundraising, advocacy programs were all organized and conducted by students. And so when I came to Berlin, I came last September, and I think I had this sort of idealized version of what I would be doing here. You know, I kind of had a savior complex, and I came saying, you know, I'm going to help refugees, I'm going to connect with people, and I thought I could apply the same framework that was being done in the US here in Germany. And so in the US, the other chapters, they were having film screenings, they were having like donation drives for clothes, food, things like that. They were fundraising for really large NGOs, and I thought I could do that same work here. But then I realized very quickly that when I got to Berlin, the visibility of a lot of the refugee population was drastically different from the visibility in US cities. And so I thought, well, here it would be great to, you know, to have film screenings and to advocate, but I wanted to connect with people individually. And so I started meeting with organizations and trying to get a better understanding of sort of what was going on in Berlin and how we could be involved. And long story short, basically what I discovered was what was needed most was help with sort of integration. So sort of this large influx and this crisis of refugees, that part was kind of over. Now people who are here to stay, they needed help with like learning German, dealing with German bureaucracy, integrating into Berlin culture and things like that. And it was difficult because I realized, you know, as students, we also just got here. So we're not really the ones to help with integration. We also are still learning German. We also are still trying to understand German bureaucracy. And so our objectives kind of shifted with that realization, which leads me to an important point of, you know, with any sort of advocacy work, it's important to sort of listen first and ask what is needed before you start to act. And I admired sort of the enthusiasm of our group because everyone thought, you know, I want to volunteer, I want to get out there, I want to teach. But at the same time, that intention could be misplaced because sometimes what you have to offer is not actually needed, or sometimes you need to alter the way that you help. And so I figured the best way that we could help as a group would be sort of through like peer-to-peer social support. And so I'll just give one brief example. So last November in Thanksgiving, an organization called Visioneers, they were hosting a Thanksgiving dinner, and that included newcomers, refugees, anyone was welcome to sort of gather together. And so as a group, we attended this dinner and we met with individuals. And in that experience, just sort of meeting people, eating together, socializing, there was a lot of cultural exchange happening and things like that. But it happened naturally, and it wasn't sort of this forced effort, and there wasn't sort of this top-down, like, I'm here to help you approach. It was sort of just like, we're all people, we're all going to get to know each other. And so I figured the best way that we could sort of offer our advocacy and help as a group would be to sort of target young people in sort of this social setting and like peer-to-peer relationship building. And so just to briefly talk about kind of like what else we did and what that resulted in, we did have a lot of students volunteer individually with organizations. So we had like UNICEF, the international team, some people were volunteering with them. Some people also volunteered with Visioneers, the organization I just mentioned. And so we had people volunteering individually. And then we also sort of continued our online advocacy, and so we have a Facebook page, and we are posting articles and helpful sort of like things people can do in their own time to support the refugee community here in Berlin. But it was important for us to realize that we were here for a short period of time, and we were a bit aspirational with our objectives. We thought we could achieve so many things. We thought we were going to help people, but at the same time, that's not really sustainable, because if you're here for a short period of time, not only does it take time to understand the complexities of the conflict and the communities that you're serving, it also takes time to build trust, especially if you're dealing with populations who've experienced trauma and things like that. It takes time to understand, to build trust, and then to create a sustainable project. It's not just about, I show up, I help, and then I leave. And so all of this was sort of the process of No Lost Generation and trying to start one here in Berlin. And so it has closed down because the internship with the State Department ended in May, but I do think that just because, this one option is no longer available, that doesn't mean that another student group can also come about and continue sort of this work of trying to connect with other young people who are also newcomers in Berlin. And so I hope that was clear. I hope everyone gets a good understanding of No Lost Generation. I don't want to take too much time because I want to make sure our panelists have ample time to present themselves, and so you can ask them a few questions before we break and then start our panel discussion. So up first, I would like to introduce two members from YPIDA, Onur Aguz Dalal and Ufuk Bal, who will be presenting on their organization YPIDA.